throughout my journey as a student, but also to not forget my C students, right? My B students, because those are the students that get forgotten the most. And actually that's the thing, right? Our students that get C's and B's are the ones that are also getting student loans because they're not the ones granted, the academic achievement award the first 2 years of college. And I think that's something we don't talk a lot about.
Welcome to the Student Loan Podcast.
Here, you'll find practical advice on tackling student loan debt, paying down your higher education expenses,
and inspiring stories about paying off student loans. We're your hosts, Daphne Vanessa
and Shamil Rodriguez. Before we begin, we have a message from a very special VIP.
Please rate, review, and subscribe to the Student Loan Podcast.
This is not professional advice, and we speak from our own personal views and opinions.
The Student Loan Podcast is brought to you by Start New, where you can serve your community and get rewarded with tuition and student loan payments. To check out if Start New is on your campus, visit startnew.com.
Welcome to another episode of the Student Loan Podcast, everyone. Today we have a very special guest for you. As the semester has gotten underway, and some of you who may be now soon to be dealing with student loan payments, you may be thinking to yourself, well, after I'm done with all of this, what am I going to do? I mean, do I just now spend all this money going out to concerts and bars and restaurants? Or do I actually invest my money or do a little bit of both, right? So today we actually have Lucia Pilar from the Health and Wealth Journey, who's actually going to share some of her tips. But before we get into that, we're actually going to have her share her story because it's pretty inspiring and it's actually how she got on our radar, and we can't wait to share it with you to hopefully inspire you to do the same. Because guess what? Not everybody who joins the Student Loan Podcast has student loan debt. And Lucia is one of those people that went to school for free. And guess what? She's also taught her siblings how to do the same thing too. So without further ado, let's turn over to you, Lucia.
Hi, hello. Thank you for having me today. I'm so excited. So a little bit about me. I am a first generation Mexican American from South Central LA, born and raised. My parents immigrated back in the early 90s, and soon after marrying, they came. Fun fact, my mom was actually pregnant when she crossed the border from Mexico.
Nice.
Just because
I'm
she knew
with you, right?
with me. I'm the oldest of four. So growing up, education was super important. My parents only went to school up to like 5th grade, 8th grade. So my parents were like, you need to go to school. And it was really difficult because my parents also didn't want me to lose my culture. So they did not allow me to speak English at home, but only Spanish. So it was just constant, like I had to learn English at school, but I couldn't really practice it as much as I wanted to at home because I was only allowed to listen to media in Spanish. So, now I'm very thankful because I am fully bilingual. But like I said, I grew up in South Central LA. All of my peers growing up, we were all low income. We had different types of struggles in our homes. And that really motivated me to go to college. I clearly remember I was in 5th grade, and the first time I heard the word college, I was like, I don't know what that is. We had a college student come in, and all I really remember is she said, you can eat in the classroom. And I was just like, that sounds like I want to go there. And then in 6th grade, I remember having a mentor that said, that if you get good grades, you can go to USC for free, which USC is like the street. It's actually south of USC, South Central LA. And I was like, wait, I'm never going to be there. That place is like really nice. And then again, I think I was very lucky. I was always placed in the honors classes, even though I was going to like LAUSD schools and known to be not the quote unquote good schools. I was always placed in honor classes. And that really helped me because the treatment that we would get was very different and very evident. And again, when I was in 9th grade, I remember having a teacher told me, that if you get straight A's in high school, you can go to Stanford for free. And it cost $60,000. That was in 2009. And if you remember, we were just coming out of a recession, or we were still in a recession. So when this teacher said, Stanford pays students like you to go there for free, it's $60,000 a year. I have to get straight A's because my parents don't even make 60K a year. They probably made half. So I was really motivated. And again, I took all AP courses, honors classes, and played all the sports I could, did all this organizing in my community, just everything and anything that I can get my hands in, because I was like, I want to stand out. But again, like I said, I it's my hard work, but I always remember that privilege I had. Like, not many kids were being taught like that, especially where I went. I went to Fremont High School, the first school that got reconstructed in LAUSD, meaning that everybody got fired and it got started from scratch when I was in 10th grade. So it's just the type of motivation honor kids and AP kids were given was just, it really increased the gap. And once again, when I was a junior, I got scouted by a program called One Voice that helped low-income students in LAUSD apply to schools in the East Coast, all the liberal arts colleges. And their goal was for us to not only leave LA, but also get the best financial aid, because they knew that these schools were providing all that financial aid at first. So I ended up applying to all these schools like Middlebury, Bowdoin, Wellesley, Smith, all these liberal arts colleges. And obviously, as I was applying to them, I was like, I don't want to go to these schools. Like, who goes here? I want to go to UCLA, UC Berkeley, the big name schools in California. But I ended up applying. I ended up going through the process because they paid for my college applications, SAT scores, and I got into Wellesley College. And when I got the financial aid, I remember it was about $60,000. It was, again, like that number came up again, $60,000, and I only had to pay $1,000 per year. And I decided to go. I'm like, this is the best it's gonna get. I also had gotten into UC Berkeley, but I decided not to go because I said, well, Wellesley is, these liberal arts colleges are just for undergrad. You can only do undergrad once. I can always go to grad school and figure out the student loans maybe later there then. But this was my story, right? This was one way that I learned, quote unquote, how to get the best financial aid. I didn't know this, right? And a lot of my peers didn't know this. I feel that if a lot of more of my peers would have learned or known and have had access to these programs that I did have, they would have applied to these liberal arts colleges and gone to school for free. Or even at Wellesley, where one of the reasons why I think I was able to graduate Wellesley is because they offer that support. They ensure, right, that their graduation rate stays really high. Like, you're graduate no matter what, even if it's really hard. So that's my story on how I went on school, basically on a free ride. And my sister, she's 5 years younger than me, she goes to Wellesley too, again on a free ride. My sister goes to state school, again on a full ride. And as I was telling you prior to this podcast is, and realizing, right, that the middle class, right, I grew up low income, but when I was at Wellesley, I realized that all my middle class friends and peers were the ones holding the most student loans. And that was very sad to see, because yes, I realized like I grew up low income. I deserve to be here, right? I had to tell myself I deserve to be here despite me being on the floor, right? It was also, when you grew up not really having money, like, you also wish other people had that same opportunity as you. But I could always see my middle class told me the rich people, their parents are going to pay for them. They don't have to worry about school. Their legacy, or for the most, it's known as legacy. When you're low income, financial aid comes through for most people, right? But when you're middle class, there's just this gray area where people get screwed. And it really pains me. Like, even now as a teacher, it really hurts me to see like a lot of my students, my future students, getting in student debt, when I'm like, education should be free. And it also bothers me when like certain skills are not taught at school, like financial literacy. I look back and I'm like, I'm kind of happy I didn't pay for school because I was not taught financial literacy.
I mean, what an amazing story. I think so inspiring for people to really understand where you came from, like literally crossing the border in your mother's stomach to getting a full ride, and not only getting a full ride, but being able to have a career and then teach your family the same. Talk to us a little bit about what it means to you to be a teacher and why you think education is so important.
So for me, I just love my teacher. I have really great teachers. But again, like I said, I was always placed in good, quote unquote, the good classes, the better classes. And I've been out of high school for almost 8 years. And I can tell you that I can count with my hands the amount of people that graduate college in 4 years.
Wow.
Some are still, and I'm really proud of them, like they're still graduating like every single year. You know, we've been out of high school for 8 years and we're still on that journey, which makes me very proud of them because it's like they're still going for it despite the 4 year goal, right? And when I became a teacher, that was my goal, because when I was in college, I constantly saw a lot of my peers dropping out from college. And
Wow.
even worse, some had debt because they took out student loan debt to go to school and they just didn't finish. So my goal when becoming a teacher was not only to continue providing these resources that I had acquired throughout my journey as a student, but also to not forget my C students, right? My B students, because those are the students that get forgotten the most. And actually that's the thing, right? Our students that get C's and B's are the ones that are also getting student loans because they're not the ones given, being granted, the academic achievement award the first 2 years of college. And I think that's something we don't talk a lot about.
No, we don't.
That extra support that they're not given. See it, and I recognize that privilege. Like that's why I always say, like I was privileged enough to, like, even if my high school did not prepare me for college, and I was struggling throughout college to graduate, I was given at least that opportunity.
Yeah.
Through an award, through a grant.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to recognize that.
That's beautiful. I mean, the fact that despite your background, you still recognize any form of privilege is just a testament to your character. I mean, I think a lot of people can fall victim mindset, right? Where they just focus on the negative, but you've really sort of shined a light on some positive aspects to your background and how that was able to bring you to success. So thank you so much for sharing that. You mentioned a few times the privilege and being selected to be in honors classes. How did that happen? And why do you think you were selected for honors?
From the very beginning, my parents were just really big on education. My mom would train me. Like my mom, it was actually my parent that only went to 5th grade, but she would drill me. Like I learned how to read and write in Spanish before I was 3. And that was because she was just like, you're gonna have to go to school. I think just having those skills and my mom preparing me at such a young age really motivated me. But my motivation also came because when I was like 4 years old, my mom took me to Mexico for like a couple months. She actually wanted to have us move back, but then she saw that my education wasn't going to be the same, and we just came back to the US. So I think that was my motivation of, I'm going to go back to the US for an education. And that was what drove me into, my academic achievement path.
So today you are not only helping others and inspiring others as a teacher, but you also run a successful online presence. You're a content creator where you share wealth building tactics. Talk to us about what you're doing today and how you're inspiring people.
Yes, so I am a money coach, and I help first gens, women, BIPOC to gain control of their finances, get straight with their money through budgeting, saving, investing, money mindset. I'm even helping out people start their businesses online, because I have learned a lot while growing an online business, and I want to make sure that, hey, if this helps, go ahead, try it out, because it's working for me. I started this because, kind of to tell a little bit about the background story, in 2018, my paternal grandfather got really sick in Mexico. I was a teacher, but at that time, I was also getting my master's in education. So actually, I did have to pay for my master's in education, about 8K or 9K per year for 2 years. So I didn't really have that much money, because I will get my paycheck, it will go to my education, and it was just basically living paycheck to paycheck. What saved me was I was living at home, because I'm here at home in LA. But other than that, I would have probably been like a lot of my peers who were getting money, student loans, to pay the rent and pay their schooling. So back in 2018, despite that though, I was still living paycheck to paycheck. I didn't know how to budget. I just had no concept of what personal finance was. And me and my dad went to Mexico to go see my grandfather. And I remember I don't have any money to give to my dad to give to my grandfather, right? Like this just felt this responsibility, this like you want to give your parent, like I have a job, I'm a teacher, I have a good salary. Why do I not have money to give to my dad? And I remember just sitting there and like wanting to cry because I was like, my dad's in his mid 40s, I'm in my early 20s. If this happens again in 20 years, am I really going to be able to give my dad the money that he deserves? Am I able to do that if I have kids? Am I going to be able to do that if I'm still a teacher? And all these questions started flooding, and it all was relating, around money. And I wanted to cry, and my brain went into problem solving mode, and I said, I'm going to start a party business because LA has parties all the time.
It
I'm going to
does.
start a party business.
Regs.
Love it.
Take me to
And I went on OfferUp and I looked at a lady. She was selling her party business equipment. I messaged her. I came back to LA. I took out a loan from the bank and I bought the business, and I started, I was full-time teacher, part-time business owner, and I did that. And within 16 months, I was able to pay about $28,000 in my grad school program, the business equipment, and any consumer debt I had, in which I was so really proud of myself.
What inspired you? I mean, I feel like
we can't just gloss over that. We
skipped over a huge accomplishment. So you basically said you were inspired by a family moment where you wanted to contribute more to your family and you weren't able to. And so that was the catalyst for you just saying, I'm just going to start a party business. Hey, I'm going to buy your business. Like, how did you talk to us about that process? Because that's really important.
I would say there's a couple things. I think for one, my first year as a teacher, I was tutoring. And I was tutoring at this company and they were paying me like $15 an hour. And I was fine with it. Again, it was as the money was coming in, it was leaving because I wasn't budgeting correctly. But soon later, once I left the business, that tutoring company, I still have parents calling me like, hey, like I want you to tutor my son. And I'm like, yeah, sure, I can do that. And they would say, okay, we'll pay you $40 an hour. So they were paying me more than my boss at that time. So when I was sitting around that, I was like, I don't want to go work anymore for a company because I know they're not going to pay me what I think I'm worth. Sure. And I thought, well, with the part business, it's going to be mine. It's going to be my equipment. It as long as you maintain it, it just keeps on, you can continue using it. So that's how it went. I think it just went around that. But I think entrepreneurship just runs in my family. My mom she has never really had a job. She has always just worked out a side hustle. She cooks, she sells flowers. She sells rubber bands. She sells all these things. She flips things. So I think in a way, it just was one of those things that maybe I was thinking about my family, that maybe my own family called me back.
I love it.
I don't know. That's what I want to say, because that was the catalyst of me becoming a business owner and now an online business owner.
Love it.
That's phenomenal. I think to use that opportunity now to really dive into something that I think is really important that I love to share when we have guests like you on the pod is the importance of family, right? You can hear it like coming through the channel that you are so proud of your family and you understand the importance of the sacrifices they've made to put you in a position to succeed, right? So can you talk a little bit about that? Can you talk about why is that something that even matters to you? I want to make sure that people are out there recognizing that your parents make decisions for your benefit, whether you see it or not. Like your mom went back to Mexico, your parents went back to Mexico and they were like, all right, well, you know what? Education's not good enough for what we want for our daughter and our kids. We're going to go back again and we're going to make this work. So can you talk a little bit about that if you don't mind?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of things, right? I am Mexican American, so my family is from Mexico, a very small village. I think now there's probably like maybe less than 1,000 people in that village. So there was no roads. Like my parents grew up with no electricity, no running water, none of that, except some paved roads was actually probably in the early thousands. So basically in the last 2 decades, that's when people finally had all these utilities running a little bit easier for them. So I think that really sparks, I think that's one thing I have to say, right? I think that's what sparks me. Like my parents come from, their village is just one way in, one way out. There's nothing else. And my grandmother, again, she grew up, she was also an entrepreneur. Even though in a small village, she was doing so many things. She went from having 1 cow to having 60 cows. She sold bread. She had a store. There was like everything. And even despite my 8, 9 uncles and aunts being here in the US, she worked until the last day when she passed away of diabetes back in like 2014. And that for me was just that hustle family has. Like she had no business working with diabetes, but she still did it because she just loved, like, being independent, doing her own, having her own money. And I think that's what really now sparks me, because I'm like, wow, like my grandmother had no access to internet. She could barely read and write. And she was doing money moves left and right. I have access to the internet. I have an education. Like I'm going to do what my grandmother would have done if she had all these resources that I have. And that's really hard to sometimes think about it, because my grandmother died when I was still in college and I was not even thinking of entrepreneurship. That I wish my grandmother was here. Like I know, despite her, again, not knowing how to use a phone, she would have given me the best business advice. So that's what motivates me a lot. Just this ability that now as a woman, I can go ahead and build whatever I want to build and help as many people as I want to help.
Amazing story. No, I think I'm so touched, especially by the grandmother comment. I wish my grandmother was here too. That's so beautiful. So beautiful.
No, I think it's extremely inspiring, and I hope
Thank
that and please guys, when you guys check out the show notes, we're gonna share at the end of the podcast episode Lucia's handle and her website and the ways you can get in touch with her to get coaching. But before we get there, I wanted to speak about one more topic before we go back into the health and wealth journey. I wanted to ask, I love that some of the posts you've put out there are really family oriented, right? So we've covered how much your parents have inspired you, but I love that you highlight your siblings. I know you posted that you recently put them on your your credit line, I believe it is, right? You
I
them,
saw that post.
right? So I know so many people that would be like, no way, right? But I think it's really great that you've done that. And so can you just talk a little bit about that and why does it matter to you?
I believe that, again, I am sometimes mind blown, because I'm like, my parents come from a very small village and they now own a home, all my uncles, all my aunts. And I'm like, they went from nothing to something. And I cannot imagine now I think, because they, like, again, at the very beginning, I said all my uncles and aunts, because we live in LA, they never really assimilated. They never learned the language. They were very and they don't know English. They still to this day don't know English.
Don't worry, I have family members like that too.
And which is like really beautiful, because we all of us know Spanish, but it's also sometimes a lot of opportunities get missed. So like I said, we're over maybe 40 cousins, and I'm the first one to graduate with a bachelor's and a master's. So when I say, like, when I show all this information on Instagram, and the reason I'm so passionate to share is not only because I have 3 younger siblings that I have to look out. Actually, I feel like I have to look out for my whole family and make sure that they're on it, because I'm one of the older cousins. So I'm like the older sibling. And for me, it's just the way I don't only just think about it as my family, but also in a community. I always wanted, okay, if I have $1,000 more, I can donate $1,000 more. But I'm like, if I show other people how to make $1,000 or save $1,000, or invest and make $1,000 out of their investments, or even more, obviously, what can we do as a community? And I think it goes with family, but it goes more like, okay, that's my family. What are we going to be able to do? And I think that's why so many women of color in the personal finance are so passionate, because we're always also so giving. We're always trying to give. And I see that too. When my business makes money, I start pouring my money into other women businesses because I know that I want to uplift. To answer your question about family, I think because our family is so big, and at least in a lot of Latino families are really big, it ends up extending to like community.
No, I think you hit it spot on, 1000%. My dad's one of 11, so trust me, when you said the 40 cousins, I was like, oh, 40 cousins, I got you, no problem. No, but I
Yeah.
mean, back to you, and back to that. Thank you for sharing that, right? And I think it's so important to highlight that community aspect. That's why we started the Student Loan Podcast. That's why, when we told you before we recorded today, why we started Start New in the first place, right? All of this ties together with the idea of uplifting our community, uplifting people that could have more if we just share more information, right? And so thank you so
Mhm.
much for doing that. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for putting out the information for other people to learn from. It's such a mind-blowing experience. And let me know if this is how it was for you. But to me, it's been perceived as such a mind-blowing experience when you go to school and you're like, wow, I didn't know that. Wow, I didn't know that. Let me just put this in my bag. Let me put this in my bag. Let me put this in my bag. I'm going to take this and give this to you, give this to you, right? And so you end up becoming this wealth of change. Whether you're going to see it or not, you're going
Mhm.
to end up being this wealth of change for people that know you directly or people that don't know you, but they saw you, right? So I think, Lucia, I just got to
Mhm.
say, great job. Thank you so much for sharing that part of your story. So let's shift gears, Daphne, unless you wanted to, I was going to shift gears back over to the health and wealth journey. Um, I wanted to discuss that. I was go back to that original question. You answered the why you help your siblings in your community, but I think it was a really interesting point with like co-signing loans or giving people access to your credit, right? You've authorized your
Mhm.
siblings. I've heard so many people, and I've been a beneficiary of having family members that have co-signed when I first went to college. So I'm grateful for it, and I'm all for it, obviously. But I know a lot of
Mhm.
other people that were like, I would have never done that for you. I would have never done that for somebody else. Blah, 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 blah. I'm not risking my credit for it. So, what do you say about that, especially as somebody who is coaching other people on how to create wealth for their family?
Just so people who have not seen my post know what we're talking about, the post that I made was had my 15-year-old brother, 19-year-old sister, and 21-year-old sister as I I have them under one of my credit cards. So long story short, just by doing that, my sister, who is 19 years old, she had never had a card. So my card was the very quote unquote first card that she has under her credit score, her credit report. So when she went to apply for her first credit card, she actually not only did she get approved, when she got her credit card, it said that her credit score was in the high 700s. She had no clue. She thought it was out of 1,000. She had no clue. So she's like, yeah, my credit score says that it's in the high 700s. And I'm like, wait, what? No way. You usually start in the 600s. So then it clicked and I'm like, oh, I had put you under my credit card a couple weeks before you went like sign up for yours. And she's like, oh, okay. And yeah, I made her go to Credit Karma, create an account. And yep, right there was not only her credit card line that she had opened recently, but also the one that I have had. And the card that I put her in was a card I had for like 3, 4 years. So her credit
Mm,
history was already 2 years old, averaging the new one
great.
and the older one. So for our listeners, that's what happens, that if you have a credit card and you want to authorize someone, like either you can authorize basically anyone, like a spouse, a cousin, anyone, you would help them with their credit score. So what I tell people, right, this I wanted to share this with people because I think I believe in building wealth as a family, not only as an individual. And I know that this is going to really help my siblings. I mean, it clearly did. My sister came with a good credit score,
Yeah.
doing absolutely nothing, and she had her credit card approved for much more than my other sister who had the same card.
Mm,
I think 3 times more. So I do this. I want to build wealth as a family, and I want to make sure that my siblings have an easier time building that wealth. Now, it's not for everyone. It can't, it's again, I think it just goes back into setting boundaries. And that's one thing that I did with my siblings. Like I have access to the card. The card is always the only person that is able to log in is me. So that's what I like about that. I can block the card at any time. So there's these are things that you have to think about. Do I have access to block this card? right? And I think it's easier for me. I opted for a card because I did not want to sign for a car. But again, it all depends where you are, right? If I was planning to make a big purchase, I probably wouldn't want to sign for a big payment. But maybe if I'm not planning on buying a home or a car anytime soon, maybe I'm willing to do that. But I think a lot of it has to be with communication and just knowing the type of relationship you have with the person. And some people, I would never do that. That's totally fine. You have to respect, because at the end of the day, personal finance is personal. But I still think this is like I think this as some money.
Yes, no, I'm also the oldest. I'm the oldest girl in all of the cousins on my mom's side. So we also have very large family with lots of people in it, and totally agree with you that sort of family wealth building really is how you lift each other up. And I'm so proud when I see, my family members as well, who have listened and have done quite well for themselves. Not to age myself, but I just feel so much older than all of them because I'm the oldest, right? That's probably why, the oldest girl. And so there's so much pride when, you see other people sort of glowing up with you. And it's such a blessing to be a part of that journey. So completely agree that wealth is community, wealth is family. And when you think about it like that, it's much more giving than just selfish success. So I agree the community aspect is so important to making an impact with your money, right? I love that you're talking about credit and the importance of credit, because oftentimes, maybe not everybody knows what that is. Like you said, we didn't cover personal finance in high school or secondary. We did not cover personal finance in college, potentially. So you're starting your life as an adult, not really knowing anything. So what do you think, from your experience, the pillars are of personal finance? What areas should people really be focused on in terms of getting to wealth?
My main pillars are money mindset, because our money mindset is, we can probably, like, maybe our first memories with money is when we were like 3-4 years old. So money mindset, and that has really our behaviors are coming from what our parents taught us, right? I remember, for me, like, I hated money up till I became a business owner, because my parents would always fight about money. It was a constant thing where I thought money was evil. I'm like, my parents are always fighting. They're about a divorce because of money. Why would I want that? So my money mindset has had to change a lot. So that's definitely like my biggest pillar. Also, because I grew up low income, I always thought, like, am I worthy of having money, right? When you have debt, am I ever going to get out of debt? It's just all these questions, right? It's just a mindset. So money mindset is probably the most important one. Budgeting, saving, investing. Those are the main pillars. And I know it's like, well, that's everything. But if you just tackle each topic little by little, it's going to be much easier than, instead of saying, well, everything, you just say, okay, learn how to budget, learn how to save, learn about investing, check your money mindset. It's just much easier to start digesting.
Yeah. So let's give 2 examples. How's that? We'll do one example of a current student, and we'll do a second example of somebody who graduated, and let's see what your advice is for these hypothetical people. So one person, we'll call him Leonel. I don't know, I just came up with that. Leonel. Leonel has $20,000 of student loan debt. He's a senior in college. He's going to graduate. So he's had mostly scholarships, but he had to take out some student loan debt along the way so that he could pay for housing and food while he studies to get good grades so that he can get a job. And he's considering, and he's accumulated interest, by the way, while in school as well, on deferred payments. He's considering taking the 9-month pause after and not paying anything. What advice do you have for him after he graduates?
So one thing I tell my clients, and just in general, we need to look at the numbers. We need to run the numbers. One, I would say, well, okay, so you're a senior. what's your job? What's like your future job looking like? What's your salary? Okay, what's going to be their salary? Where are you going to be living? Like, what's the city? What's the cost? Right, that's when budgeting comes. Like, we kind of have to see how much are you going to be spending, and what's the leftover. And then from there, we can be like, okay, let's start running again the numbers. Like, okay, we save. How much can we save? Because we do want that. We want to make sure that if something happens, he doesn't have to go get credit card debt because, like me, right? I got into an accident. So like, you want to avoid that. So that it's having a saving plan is 100% important. And then from there, just see, okay, what is the interest rate? 5%, 3%. And then from there, what are the minimum payments? Can you pay more with the money you have left over? Also, okay, if there's some money left over, well, maybe we want to start investing, because remember, Roth, if you're 22, prime time to start investing in a Roth IRA, because interests get accumulated and you can max out 6K per year.
Sure.
For example, I would have to like list, right, the numbers, because if he's going to go back live at home, wow, beautiful. But if he's going to have to go move to another city, okay, our numbers are going to change.
Yeah. No, and I love going through the numbers. So, okay, we spoke to Leonel. Now let's speak to Victoria, because I just like that name. And let's talk to Victoria about her life. She graduated 3 years ago. She's paying her student loan debt already. The minimum payments only, though. She has a whopping $600,000. Well, let's make it more realistic. Let's say $300,000 of student loan debt. And she has an average of 6% interest. She's living in a big city like LA or New York, so life is expensive. She doesn't have a family yet because she's deferring it, but she wants to start investing. She wants to start sort of starting her life, but at the same time, she feels burdened with these student loan payments. Should she start tackling the 6-figure student loan debt, or should she say, I'm just going to start investing, let me only pay the minimum payments, or a combination?
Well, okay, this is a really good question. So right now the stock market is doing really, really good, really good, actually.
Yeah.
There's a couple things. I don't know what her salary is, so I don't know if she can, I don't know what her lifestyle is.
She makes a baby 6-figure salary. So she's like at the beginning of the 100,000s, let's say like 120 or something like that. Because she's in a big city, her lifestyle inflation is somewhat real. So she's probably at least spending 50% of her income, if not more, closer to 70% on living expenses.
So I would tell her for sure to start making bigger payments. 300,000 is a lot in student loan debt. So just making the minimum payment and a 6% is very, very high. I would tell her, if she doesn't have a savings and an emergency fund, to start building that one first before she starts investing. I don't know if she has one, but if she doesn't, I would say do that, because in case something happens, she gets laid off, she needs to take some time off, she at least has that cushion. She does have an option. And again, I think personal finance is personal. Like, some people, there's no right way, right? Like, some people are hearing and they're like, she should pay her student loans, no investing. Other people are like, she should have a medium. Other people are like, well, just start investing, period.
Yeah.
So there's no right way. I think it also, people have to think about, well, what's your long-term goal? Is your long-term goal to be debt free? Is your at the moment, right? Is your long-term to own a property? What is the long term? I think that's also, especially when there's a big amount of debt, these are the type of questions we should ask ourselves. I would tell her to make more than the minimum payment for sure. With index funds, right? That's one thing we talk about in investing. In investing, they do have a higher than 6% rate. So there's like a rule, not a rule, but some people say, well, if your interest rate that you're earning in your investments is higher than the interest rate in your debt, then you should definitely do both. That I like that one, because at least you're not losing money. You're not going against negative. Now, if when some people come and they're like, hey, I have like 50K in debt, all my credit cards have an APR of 25%, but I want to invest, I tell them, well, wait. Yeah. Let's just say the best scenario you'll get is 10% APY, right? Interest rate in your investments, and you are constantly paying 25% APR in your credit card, you are still losing a negative 30 to negative 15% per year. I don't think that's the right thing to do. I think you should pay your debt first, and then once you feel like, okay, I can invest, and you do that.
Yeah. I love it.
That's great. That's a great response.
So we went into a little glimpse of what like an awesome coaching opportunity would be with you. I think that was, you were not prepared for that. So I just want to let the audience know that we did not prepare Lucia
That's
at
true.
all. We just, that did off the cuff. And I love how you went into the different scenarios and sort of gave the pros and cons. I agree with your advice on sort of thinking about percentages and interest and looking at that gain as compared to what you're really losing on a loan. And so making that your driver. We've actually covered this on one of our earlier podcasts where a multifamily real estate investor had successfully paid off, 6 figures worth of student loan debt, but wasn't concerned about paying everything off because he was making so much money in multifamily real estate that it didn't necessarily make sense to focus on the losing amount of debt. And so now he's made hundreds of millions over, and paying that off is totally plausible. So I think that it sort of gives you context. Well, if in this percentage of time I can make this amount with investments, perhaps I should think about focusing my energy here and still sort of paying the minimum and a little more than the minimum so that you're tackling principal, but then you're also still focusing on building wealth, because we don't want to forget the goal for, and everybody's goal is different. I like that you asked the question. I tend to assume that, people don't want debt and that everybody wants to be wealthy. I know that's not the case for everybody, but let's say that that is your goal. Then yes, let's start to think about investing. Let's start to think about still tackling the debt, but then also investing. So really thank you for bringing that up and sort of going through those scenarios. That was super exciting.
Yeah, no, I was not aware of this testing. But and you made a good point, because I remember one time hearing, it was just this YouTube video. I don't remember the name of the guy, but he said, I only pay the interest. I have a lot of money. And he's like, I'm okay with dying with my student loan debt. It doesn't matter to me.
Mm-hmm.
As long as I'm paying the interest, I'll always keep the and that's something that works. And that's one thing that sometimes people might be like, you know what, I don't care. Like, I just want to be, I don't mind having $300,000 the rest of my life, as long as I'm living a good life.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Like, if that works for them,
correct,
and they're still able to like rent and live and have a happy life, then that's a personal choice.
Correct. Yeah. And we don't judge people's choices. I hope anything that I said before was not a judgment. I agree with you. Everybody has a different view. My default is to assume that everybody wants to pay off debt, but it's not true. I know so many people that are like, so what? It's going to die anyways. Like or what's the forgiveness aspect, where after you've paid a certain amount, it's forgiven. The servicers are really selling that one these days on the customer hotlines. So, there are a lot of different options. You have to do what makes you happy and what you feel comfortable with. And I love that you went through the questions to ask. That's almost the most important thing, so that everybody can apply sort of it to their specific scenario. So thank you for sharing that.
No, thank you. And so I think, Lucia, this might be a good time for people to figure out how to get in touch with you, right? And to figure out, are you offering coaching? You had mentioned this in the beginning. I just want to bring it back to whoever's been like, wow, I've been taking so many great notes. Hold on, how do I get in touch with her? But let's go ahead in that. And then I think, Daphne, we might have enough time to end on a lightning round. It's one of my favorites, but let's Lucia, share with everyone where they can find you so they can get in touch with you.
Again, I am Lucia Pilar, and you can get in touch with me on Instagram at The Wealth and Health Journey. My website's coming up soon. It's actually already live at thewealthandhealthjourney.com. To quickly go over the name, The Wealth and Health Journey. The name came from, like I said, my parents work really hard. A lot of our parents, especially first-gen, low-income parents, work so hard to make ends meet. And I didn't share this, but even though I did pretty good when I was doing my party business, I realized that the reason why I started a party business was because I always associated labor with money. And I was like, the only way I'm going to have money is if I am working. And that's what ended up happening. I ended up working too much to have this money. And at the end of it, and I shared this in my Instagram page, I lost so much weight. like 10% of my weight. I wasn't taking care of myself, and it was all because of money. Now, I saw myself in a way like mirroring my parents, right? My parents worked so hard. And sometimes I see my mom, especially my mom who has anxiety, she goes through these periods where she works a lot and then she stops working because she has to take care of her health. So for me, when I thought of the wealth and health journey, I said, I want to build wealth and I want to keep my health, because those are the two most important assets that we have. Health being the main asset.
Yeah.
So that's why that's the name of my Instagram handle and my brand, because I want to help people start building wealth through investing where they don't have to sacrifice their health. They'll sacrifice time, right? Because investments come with compound interest and that takes time, but at least we're not sacrificing our health, and we're kind of breaking this cycle of like you have to work to make money. So I am a money coach. I coach anyone who wants coaching when it comes to personal finance, but my target audience is BIPOC, women of color, first gens, anyone. And I help with budgeting, investing, saving, and now I'm actually transitioning into helping people build wealth through online businesses, because I have realized that with all the information and all the experience I have acquired in the past 2 years of building my own online business, I want to share that with others. So it's crazy because I started off with a lot of my clients as just a money coach, and now I'm also now like a business coach.
Awesome. We love that.
That is great.
You said BIPOC a few times. Can you just explain for people who don't know in the audience, what does that acronym stand for?
Yes, I use BIPOC because it's like Black, Indigenous, and POC, right? I want to be as inclusive as I can with my audience. And I feel like a lot of the times, especially with money, right, we have erased a lot of the voices of all these different marginalized communities. And I want to make that as a content creator, right, I am bringing not only listening to these voices, but also acknowledging them and realizing that why wealth is not that it doesn't come easy to us, right, but why building wealth is harder for us. And obviously, like, not like my experience is different than someone who is Black or someone who's Indigenous, but I still want to make sure that I say, you know what, is because of this, is because of that, right? Redlining, the acts against women to not have credits, a credit card until like the late 60s or 70s. Like, we have to make sure we bring these the history back, or let remind us constantly, like remind ourselves like why we are in these scenarios, in these situations. It's not because we're not working hard, or our communities are working hard. It's because there's these rules that were taken, these laws that were put in place for these certain communities to struggle to build wealth.
No, that hit me hard. I don't think a lightning round would do this episode justice, but I'm happy to do one with you.
No, I think that was actually a really great way to end the episode. Lucia, a quick question. Can people DM you or email? Which do you prefer? Just so that people want to actually just reach out to you.
Yeah, through Instagram, as long as Instagram is online. Yep. The Wealth and Health Journey is my Instagram handle. Lucia at thewealthandhealthjourney.com is my email. And I'm also on TikTok, and my website, thewealthandhealthjourney.com. So yeah, and again, like my whole goal is to make sure that we as a community are building more wealth. And I think I want to leave off with reminding, especially like whoever's listening who identifies right in these marginalized groups, communities, is I think a lot of the times we feel like we're not doing enough. Like, oh, like maybe we don't deserve to be here, maybe we don't deserve to have money, but once we start to realize all these reasons why it's difficult for us to build wealth, it's very empowering. Actually, I take it more as a challenge, and that I'm like, I'm gonna help others.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciated having you on the show today. Daphne, is there anything you want to say before we wrap up?
Follow at The Wealth and Health Journey.
Very good.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much for having us, Lucia. Everyone, if you want more information on today's episode, visit thestudentloanpodcast.com/episode 49. That's thestudentloanpodcast.com/episode 49.